Welcome in. It's a Friday edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz, and we are less than a day away from the kickoff of the 2024 season for the Boilermakers as they play host to Indiana State for a noon kick at Ross-Ade Stadium. And we'll have some analysis of the game, what to expect from the Sycamores, what to expect from the Boilers. Really, new season and year number 2 here for Ryan Walters and his staff. A lot of changes for Purdue. We'll get into all of that, and we'll have a look back on some history, which has not been so kind for Purdue in openers, just 1-6 in their last 7 September regular season openers. But we'll get into all of that in this jam-packed edition of Gold and Black Radio here on a Friday. First, we want to thank some of our sponsors for making this show possible. Thanks to Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics, and the official credit card for Purdue fans, Boiler Up, the East End Grill, and Ripple & Company, 2 distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. And, of course, the Whitaker Inn. For unparalleled comfort and cuisine, visit the Whitaker Inn. The second person to our conversation needs no introduction at all, but happy football season to Tom Diener, who joins us now on Gold and Black Radio. Like I said on Tuesday's show, it's always we talked about hope springing internal, but now I'm kind of in excitement mode. I'm in optimism mode for sure. Not only when it comes to Purdue, just basically when it comes to everything. Pumpkin spice lattes, like wearing my joggers again and sweatshirts, all of it, Tom. I'm just geeked up and ready to go.
Yeah, it's a fun time of year. Apple cider. You can bob for apples too. Carve your pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern. On and on it goes. Yeah, a lot of fun from October, Halloween, Thanksgiving to Christmas. But I digress, Derek Schultz. Yeah, football's here. It's still hot out. It's going to be about 83 on Saturday, I think. Looks like you're already in the Ross-Ade press box there. I'm in my ski lodge in West Lafayette with my 1975 paneling. But, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, so many unknowns here with this Boilermaker team. So many new faces, over 60 newcomers, Derek, between portal transfers, junior college transfers, high school kids. How's it all going to mesh together? We can speculate, have a lot of conjecture. We're going to finally take the lid off it all, Derek, get a chance to get at least one early peek at the Boilermakers here on Saturday at high noon.
Yeah, and Tom, I wanted to get your perspective, just kind of like the bird's eye view on that, because you've been around college football for so long, for decades and decades now, and this is so different and new, and the seismic changes. I mean, we have seen 50 years of changes in the last 5 years, probably. You know, Purdue's going to play a league game against Oregon. That's a conference game this year, right? Yeah. It sounds just ridiculous to say out loud, but is this the new expectation? And have you adjusted, or I guess, will you ever adjust to this being the new reality for major college football?
Yeah, I think we all are going to have to, right? It's kind of exciting, though, too. Whenever there's change, I know there's anxiety. It's the unknown, right? Nobody likes the unknown, but there's some excitement to it as well. A brave new world in college football, especially the Big Ten. 18 schools now, 4 newcomers, all from out west. Derek, you talked about Purdue playing the Oregon Ducks. The mighty Oregon Ducks will wade into West Lafayette on a Friday night, I think October 18th. Going to be a fun game. A lot of people think this is a team that could win the Big Ten, play for the national championship. So it's going to be fun to see Oregon coming in here. So you're right, a lot of change, and it continues, Derek. Revenue sharing is going to start in 2025. How our athletic department is going to be shaped moving forward with non-revenue sports. I mean, on and on it goes. You go down that rabbit hole, but for football, it's always going to be a priority. It's always going to get resources. And you know what, Derek, if you believe all the national experts, the conferences are probably going to get bigger and bigger before it's all said and done, too. So who knows where this is going to end up.
Just looking at what Ryan Walters and his staff has done with NIL, how, in your opinion, Tom, have they equipped themselves not only for the 2024 season, but kind of moving forward here in this new reality for them as well?
Yeah, I talked to Ryan about that, Derek, and he flat out said they got players this year that they would not been able to have gotten the year before. So the collective got more robust. It got better. I think Boilermaker donors realized they had to step to the plate if Purdue wanted to have a competitive product on the field. I know Ryan Walters was on an airplane a lot, flying to different cities, talking to different alumni, trying to raise funds. And I think his efforts worked. He knows he's got to wear a lot of hats. He can't just draw up plays and give motivational halftime speeches. You got to be a fundraiser too, and go out and press the flesh. And Ryan Walters is good at it. He's got a great personality. He's a young guy. And he's got that boundless energy of youth. At least for me, Derek, he's only 37 or 38 years old. So yeah, again, it's a brave new world. And in a lot of ways, having a guy like Ryan Walters who's young, he doesn't think anything's impossible. He can relate to these players. You know what? He brings a lot to the table that's very intriguing.
We've been talking about this game as I think actually I'm not going to give you credit for it. I'm going to take it just in case it goes disastrously for Purdue. I've been calling this the free space on the bingo board for Purdue-Indiana State. They're a 31.5-point favorite. It's not unheard of for teams to lose these games to FCS opponents and teams that they are overlooking. I guess my question is, Tom, is Purdue good enough to overlook Indiana State, or should we be less confident? I know Ryan Walters and his staff and his players aren't looking at it this way, but as media people and analyzing this game, should we not be using kitschy terms like free space and all of that?
I like that, free space. No, I think you're on to something. I think that's an apt description. Even though Purdue's was only a 4-8 team last year, even though they're not a Titan, I still think even Las Vegas thinks, right, that they should be able to handle the Sycamores with relative ease here, over a 30-point favorite. Indiana State was just a one-win team last year. I know last year doesn't really matter, but that's one other piece of perspective on the program. But yeah, you know, I think Purdue's not going to overlook anybody, even Indiana State. But I think in their heart of hearts, Derek, if you got the coaching staff on lie detectors, I think they would say they think they can handle these guys. And I'll be honest, you know, I don't think Purdue just needs to win. I think they need to send a message of sorts too, right? Put your foot on their throat and dominate and look good doing it on both sides of the ball. Be mistake-free and try to take care of business early. Don't let Indiana State hang around. You know, this team needs confidence. I think the fan base wants to know there's confidence. There's no better way to send confidence than by dominating an opponent. I think Purdue needs to dominate Indiana State.
Am I right in saying that potentially, Tom, this is the game that I guess a win that you would need style points, right? We're hoping for style points in how competitive they can be against Oregon and Penn State, and obviously early in against Notre Dame coming up here shortly. But I feel like any other win that Purdue gets, whether it be at Oregon State or Nebraska at home or Illinois in the Cannon game, any of those other ones, I'm kind of thinking to myself, hey, if it's 7-6 and it's a mud pit and there are 8 turnovers, but they win, fine. I don't need the style points, but on Saturday, it feels like they need them.
Yeah, I think you're right. This isn't a team competing for the national championship. It's going to be trying to compare its resume with other teams to get one of those at-large playoff berths. So you're right. Point differentials, things of that nature, style points, even though that's not a factor only in the public realm, but you're exactly right. Just win, baby, as Al Davis used to say. Just win if you're Purdue. I think you're right. Saturday, they need some style points. After that, though, just scratch out any win you can. Where this program's at, Derek, they're in the rebuilding stage, or the building stage, I should say. The roster's been totally overhauled the last year and a half. And you know, like I said, if you can get to 6 wins, that would be Big Ten Coach of the Year material, I think, at least to be considered for it if you're Ryan Walters. This team's supposed to finish last. And Vegas has, I think, the over-under win total of 4.5. So there you go. Probably going to be 5-7 or 4-8. So if you can squeeze out 6 wins, wow, that will be something. Like you said, Derek, if those wins are 10-9, hey, man, Purdue doesn't care, because when we look back on history, we're just going to look at the one-loss record. We're not going to look at scores, right?
Is there an overarching storyline, Tom, that you've got on your mind heading into a new season as something that you're most looking forward to seeing, not just against Indiana State, but just in general for this team?
I think for me, it's just one side of the ball. It's probably the defense. I think the offense is going to be a cut above, has a chance to maybe be very good. How is the defense going to be? And for me, you know, that's Ryan Walters' bailiwick, right? That's how he got this job. That's how he cut his teeth. He's a defensive guy, defensive coordinator. That's his side of the ball. Last year, they struggled over there. They were last in the Big Ten in points allowed per game. Gave up a lot of big plays. How are they going to look on that side of the ball? Because that's the side of the ball that I think in the end is going to tell the tale of this 2024 season for Purdue. Can this defense get things buttoned up, cut down those points allowed per game, reduce the big plays allowed as well and still get after quarterbacks, given some of the personnel changes that have taken place up front. For me, that's probably the overarching storyline I'm going to be looking for this fall, even though it only really involves the one side of the ball.
What are your expectations for the defense? I know that you're high on the offense. Is it more of maybe a tempered optimism, nowhere to go but up on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think you're right. I've seen a lot of Purdue football over the years, and the last 40 or 50 years, they probably had 5 to 8 outstanding defenses. It's a program that typically has to win with offense, cradle of quarterbacks. You're not going to win a lot of 14 to 13 games at Purdue. You're going to win 35 to 30, 42 to 37. And I think tempered optimism, like I said, staying in games, not being difficult to score on, not giving up the big plays, Derek. Make opponents earn their points and make them march down the field. Inevitably, they're going to make mistakes, penalties, turnovers, be a little bit more bend, don't break. But again, that the tempered enthusiasm, I think, tempered optimism. I'm not expecting 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain stuff, but again, reduction in the points per game allowed and allowing fewer big plays, I think would be good starting points.
We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, talking about taking the next step just individually for Hudson Card now as a senior and having his first real meaningful starting experience last year, at least consistent starting experience last year with Purdue. What do you think he has to do to take that next step and become an upper echelon Big Ten quarterback?
One of the biggest thing, and maybe the biggest thing, is the completion percentage. I think he needs to get that up towards 60%. Otherwise, I think, he checked a lot of the boxes last year. He's a very good athlete. He can extend plays with his feet. He can improvise. He can just flat out run if you need it. I think he's tough. I know he played through a lot of tough injuries last year, Derek. He almost missed the Iowa game. He did miss the Northwestern game, but he was not 100% for a lot of the season. So, and again, I think he can make most of the throws. His arm is satisfactory. And you talked about the second year in the system. You'd like to think you've had that 1 year season. You know the offense. And again, last year was his real first time for ever being a starter, too. So this will be his second year being a starter. So I think given all those things, most expect Hudson Card to be a better quarterback. And I've seen some Big Ten quarterback rankings this year. And they've all had Card, 8th, 9th, or 10th. I guess I find it hard to believe there's that many quarterbacks that are going to be better than Hudson Card this fall. I think a couple are without a doubt. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon and Drew Aller at Penn State. Maybe Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin. But my gosh, Hudson Card should be motivated by that. And I think he has a chance to be one of the Big Ten's better quarterbacks this fall.
Skill position-wise, particularly at receiver, how do you think that they shape up there? And maybe ceiling-wise, what can you expect from especially some of the young pass catchers that Purdue brings to the table?
Yeah, that's one position. That in the offensive line, the two spots that I think were impacted the most by newcomers, especially portal transfers. 3 portal transfer receivers arrived, 1 junior college kid. And Derek, maybe the biggest newcomer is a guy who got here in 2023, but didn't play at all because of injury in training camp, Jamal Edrin, number 7. I tell you what, they look good on the hoof, my friend, coming off the bus. They're big guys, big targets. Corey, CJ Smith from Georgia's the speedster. He won't play Saturday. And that's the one thing, Derek, coming out of the chute here with the receivers. They've been kind of banged up in camp. Again, CJ Smith's not going to play. He's got a hamstring issue. Cam Brown from UCLA missed almost all of training camp with an injury as well. He was banged up. So those are 2 of their better wideouts that really haven't been on the field for most of training camp. So they're not going to be full bull there. But I think when these guys all get on the field together and are healthy, it could be a receiving core that could be a unit that can make a lot of big plays.
I'm seeing a lot of, not that I'm looking at other shows necessarily or other coverage, but I'm seeing a lot of the game by game predictions. We're not going to do that. At least I don't think so. Alan Karpik hasn't texted my phone and said, we got to do a game by game prediction. So I'm assuming we're not going to do that. But just looking at the overall schedule, I think you mentioned 5. The Vegas over-under is 4.5. Is that what you're comfortable predicting gun to head for 2024 Purdue, 5-7?
Yeah, I think 5-7. You always look at the games against your peers, your peer programs, and there's several of those games on the schedule. I'm throwing Indiana State out. I'm assuming that's a win. Oregon State. I think Nebraska's a peer program, and Northwestern. And then you got on the road, you've got Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan State. Those are all schools I think it's no stretch to believe Purdue can't beat this year. They can't beat them this year, right? Even the road games in Champaign, in Bloomington, East Lansing, I think Purdue has a chance to win those ball games. They get Northwestern and Nebraska at home. Of course, they go to Oregon State. So with that 6 games right there, I mean, that's maybe being a little bit idealistic, but I think those are games Purdue has a good chance to win. Now, maybe they're certainly going to stumble at some point, right? Maybe they can pull a big upset along the lines that they did in 2018 against Ohio State. Who knows? But I don't think it's realistic if you look at that schedule. You could probably find 4 to 6 to 7 wins if you really want to be optimistic. And it's there. We'll see if Purdue can stay healthy and see how they develop. I do know this, Derek Schultz, that when that prediction for finishing last came out in Big Ten Media Days, I know Ryan Walters was not happy with it, and I think it's been a rallying point, will continue to be a rallying point for this program moving forward.
Yeah, I think really we might know by October 1st, right? Because Oregon State and Nebraska are in back-to-back weeks. If we're to assume a split in these first 2 with a top 10 Notre Dame team and then Indiana State on Saturday, if you're sitting 3-1 there, Tom, I think you're feeling real. I mean, you're probably on top of the Boilermakers special shirtless at that point. If they're 1-3, entirely different story for how the rest of the season slate looks at that point.
Yeah, I think September will tell the tale for the season, right? That's probably a simple observation, but unless you set the table in September, nothing these other games probably aren't going to matter. Like you said, you got to take care of business out in Corvallis. It's a long trip. And then, man, Derek, we've talked about September 28th in Ross-Ade Stadium, Nebraska coming to town for homecoming, the Big Ten opener. That's a big ball game for Purdue. Yeah. Big ball game for Nebraska, too. They're trying to pull themselves up by the bootstrap just like Purdue. So, man, you got to take care of business at home against Nebraska. That's still a team you probably have to beat if you're Purdue. And if you're 3-1, like you said, my goodness, the optimism and possibilities certainly go up, and your confidence as a football team certainly is enhanced too, right?
Absolutely. Tom will trade his West Lafayette ski lodge that he's joining us now from for the Ross-Ade Stadium press box coming up Saturday for a noon kick against Indiana State. But you had the chance to talk to Greg Jennings, the voice of Sycamore football, and we've got that coming up for you here in just a second. But Tom, appreciate it, and enjoy week 1 in the opener. We'll talk again on Tuesday.
Thank you, my friend.
And, of course, Tom will be on the Saturday simulcast as well, so don't miss that right here on Golden Black and goldenblack.com. This portion of the show brought to you by our friends at Sand Valley Resort. Heading to Camp Randall to see the Boilermakers take on the Wisconsin Badgers on October 5th. Hopefully they'll end that 20-year losing skid. That'd be nice. Sign up to win 4 tickets to see history made for the game, plus an overnight stay at Sand Valley, your new winter resort getaway. Just an hour and a half away from Madison. Visit sandvalleypursuits.com/Purdue giveaway to enter. That's sandvalleypursuits.com/Purdue giveaway to enter. And of course, we were just talking about September, first game in October 5th at Wisconsin in Madison against the Badgers, who have caused, obviously, Purdue a lot of problems over the last 2 decades or so, to say the very least. We're going to be joined by Brian Newbert here in just a little bit. But first, another Brian, and Brian Jennings, the play-by-play voice of Indiana State. He talked to our own Tom Dienart earlier this week about what the Sycamores bring to the table for Saturday's opening.
Hey, we're pleased to have Brian Jennings on the line. Brian is the play-by-play voice of the Indiana State Sycamores. Brian, thank you very much. Drop some Sycamore knowledge on us. A good place to start. Kind of tell our listeners what to expect from the Indiana State offense Saturday.
Well, I think you're going to see an offense that's going to really try to run the football early on, take a little bit of pressure off of quarterback Elijah Owens. You know, he's a redshirt freshman. Only started 4 games a season ago. Got his first start versus Ball State. I wouldn't be surprised to see them be, just like I said, a little bit more on the conservative side early, just to sort of let them get into the flow. Ples Lawrence is our sophomore tailback. Kokomo kid. Was second on the club in rushing a season ago. Runs hard, gained about 15 pounds in the off season. He's about 195 pounds now. So he was a member of the All-Missouri Valley Conference newcomer team in 23. So I would look for Indiana State to try to establish the run a little bit early on. Maybe try to roll out Owens. Work with the tight ends a little bit. Just try to take a little bit of pressure off him and let him get into the flow of the offense.
What about the defense? What's the scheme and what's the style on that side of the ball?
Well, you're going to see more so a 4-3-3-4 type look. You've got an outstanding middle linebacker in Garrett Olendike, who was a preseason All-American at the FCS level, and a guy who really has a nose for the football. Up front, you've got Jimmy Belizaire and Jeff Brown also at the other linebacker spot. Brown is a Fisher's kid. They've been around. They're both seniors. Actually, all three of them are seniors. So, an experienced club. Olendike led the club last season in tackles, and I think the defense is the strong suit of this club, which really it bodes well for them because obviously the offense is a little bit young. Secondary, you got a guy by the name of Maddox Blackwell, a Bloomington kid, who was a preseason All-Missouri Valley Conference selection as well a season ago, had a fumble recovery for a score against Indiana. And the defense is really I think will set the tone for this club this season. Obviously playing against a Big Ten opponent like Purdue bodes a little bit different approach that you might see from a Missouri Valley Conference school, just with the size of the offensive line, if nothing else. But a club that really likes to fly to the football and had success at times last season. A lot of it came down to the defense was just on the field a lot, especially in the latter stages of the second half.
And Brian, how do you see this game unfolding Saturday? Is there any way Indiana State can stay in it, maybe pull the upset, make things interesting?
Well, I think the biggest thing for Indiana State is just don't turn the football over. Don't shoot yourself, in the foot with penalties. If you recall a couple of years ago when Indiana State played in West Lafayette, Sycamore fumbled the football on the first play from scrimmage and eventually led to a touchdown, and that was it from that point on. Indiana State, playing catch-up. And I think really for Indiana State, it's just about taking care of the football, trying to do something offensively, and keep the ball out of the hands of that offense. Obviously Hudson Card is an outstanding quarterback and a guy who can beat you with his arm, no question. And then you talk about some of the transfers he's gotten coming, joining him as well, especially the wide receiver core with a couple of the kids from Georgia. So I just think right now for Indiana State, it's just about taking care of the football and just trying to establish a little bit of a flow early on.
Brian, we appreciate you taking time to enlighten us on Indiana State. Look, everybody's looking forward to the start of the season Saturday here in West Lafayette. Again, thank you.
That's Brian Jennings, play-by-play voice for Indiana State, and once again, a 12 o'clock kick coming up here from Ross-Ade Stadium, which is right behind me. I'm actually at my home in Indianapolis right now, if you guys couldn't already tell. Wanted to also remind you of goldenblack.com. Don't forget to take advantage of our flash sale for new members, 50% off an annual subscription. That has been extended due to popular demand, and obviously all of us here, Tom, Brian, Alan, me, Carm, everyone else, want you to be a part of goldenblack.com, but be sure to sign up before that expires. Let's welcome on somebody else who is no stranger here to Golden Black Radio to the stage. He is the incomparable Brian Newbert, who is kind enough to join right now. And that's a good term for you, right? Incomparable?
Oh, I'm comparable.
Describe yourself as such?
I'm comparable.
I would love to know what the comp would be. We do this all the time with athletes. Like give me the 80s comp for, Victor Wembanyama or something. And I would love to know what the comp would be from a different era for Brian Newbert. I'm scared to think of what that would be.
Anthony Mason of your Knicks.
The haircut and everything. Would he have chosen one, I think, in the side of his head for some of those playoff series?
It was like a swirl, wasn't it? Or some
he used to actually
looking thing.
He used to actually do like messages in it sometimes, and it would say like chosen one, or I think it said Mace sometimes. I think he did the Knicks logo a couple of years.
I always wanted to see him and Charles Oakley fight.
Yeah, that would be
great.
Unstoppable force,
Jeff Van Gundy hanging from one of their ankles, maybe.
Hopefully that's not the fight that we see Saturday, because if that's the fight we see Saturday, then something's gone terribly wrong for Purdue against an Indiana State team that's gone 3-19 the last two seasons. I know that we're treating this like a gimme game, but honestly, Brian, how important is it for a Purdue program that is so used to losing? I mean, Fresno last year, God, that Nevada disaster all those years ago. I mean, you can kind of go through the Penn State game that they gave away a couple of years ago as well. I mean, I'm kind of rattling them off here, but 1-6 in the last 7 September openers. I'm not counting the COVID year because that was kind of a weird circumstance year that year. It's been tough sledding in season openers for Purdue, albeit against much better opponents than what they'll face on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think it's especially tough sledding nowadays in college football because there's so much unknown. Like a bunch of guys who are going to play for Purdue on Saturday aren't guys who've put on a Purdue jersey before. And that's true for everybody. And that's going to be true for Indiana State. That's going to be true for everybody. But I think having this sort of de facto preseason game, I think is really valuable. And I'm not saying that to suggest that Purdue can't lose a game like this. It's not that long ago that Purdue had to block a field goal in the last couple minutes or seconds of a game to beat Indiana State in Ross-Ade Stadium. Those were very different times. That was the dark ages of Purdue football, arguably the worst era of Purdue football ever. But if you're not careful, you could be in a position in the fourth quarter in a game like this where anything can happen. You can leave it up to chance, but these are also games where matchups shouldn't matter all that much. It shouldn't matter what Indiana State does schematically. You should have an advantage. You should have a physical advantage at the line of scrimmage. You should have just better talent all across the board. You should have more experience because a lot of these smaller schools are going to get racked by transfers, things like that. And just simply the challenges at that level of having guys who belong on the field against Big Ten opponents. I'm not saying this to belittle Indiana State. It's just been the nature of the beast for generations for the FCS, Division I AA, whatever you want to call them. So Purdue ought to be able to, quote unquote, impose its will in a game like this. And as long as it doesn't make a lot of egregious errors, devastating errors, things like that. It should be able to, kind of control the terms of play here and win this game. And you have to, because this would be a much more damaging loss, and it would be a valuable win, obviously.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. Again, I'm setting myself up for disaster here if Purdue were to lose this game, because everybody will be like, oh, free space and give me game, and you didn't spend any time on that. But I'm just more interested in just kind of like the season outlook, because we're on the doorstep of a new year. And I asked Tom this question, and I'm interested to hear your perspective too, Brian. Just, is there one overarching storyline that you're focused on heading into this season for the Boilermakers?
Yeah, I think you just want to see progress. You can define progress a lot of different ways, but obviously this being year 2 of a new coaching staff, things like that, you just want to keep laying a foundation. You want to see players getting better. You want to see a scheme that seems to be working, things like that. I do think you have a little bit of an opportunity here because you have a senior quarterback, the guy you handpicked. It used to not be that way for new coaching staffs, where you could have your quarterback from day one. And Purdue has that with Hudson Card. They need to keep him upright. They need to keep him healthy. They need to find some receivers who can really be go-to guys for them, things like that. But you just want to see the program taking steps forward. Determining success by win totals anymore is a very flawed measure. I know fans probably don't want to hear that, but the schedule is so stacked that, in my opinion, 6 wins is the new 8, and 4 is the new 6. Things like that. That's a very unfulfilling cop-out sort of answer, and as some of our more angry viewers and readers would probably say, that's a loser's mentality. But that's the nature of the new Big Ten. That's the nature of the new Big Ten. Plus a season where Notre Dame is back on the non-conference schedule. Oregon State is a trip Purdue's making in September that they probably should never schedule again, because there's nothing to really be gained from going all the way to the West Coast in September and then coming right back that time of year. When that game was scheduled, nobody had any idea that Purdue would be doing this with Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA on occasion. So, you probably ought to win Oregon State, but it just the arduous nature of a game like that is there's more downside than probably upside in a game like that. But if you're counting wins, every win is gold nowadays, and that's kind of where Indiana State comes in. Purdue shouldn't apologize to anyone, nor should anyone in the Big Ten for scheduling wins from here on out. I think it would behoove Purdue to schedule a game like this every year, to get a MAC school on the schedule every year and just not apologize to anyone for scheduling wins, because they're going to be really hard to come by once the end of September rolls around.
Yeah, I think ideally you would play Notre Dame or Oregon State. Kind of like last year, where I think you would play Syracuse or Virginia Tech, and they added Fresno too. Have they done themselves a bit of a disservice? I mean, you're looking at this. Next year is a bit of a respite, I guess, a little bit of a break of this. But if you look in the coming years, Brian, Notre Dame's going to reappear several times. They added Wake Forest and North Carolina from the ACC. This idea that you play an FCS team and then maybe like a lower level D1 team like most teams do, or even you play, 3 gimme games. You look at some teams in the Big Ten that have like, Lawrence North, Lawrence Central, and Martinsville on their schedule. And, Purdue's going out there and really kind of killing themselves in the non-league, especially in the new Big Ten. Is that a formula that maybe if, you could go back and do it again, it would have been reconsidered?
Yeah, well, you schedule these games so far out that you schedule these games in an entirely different world. Basically, you had no idea that half the Pac-12 was going to be in the Big Ten. So the Oregon State game, it probably isn't something you would have done. The Nevada game years ago, obviously, was something Purdue shouldn't have done.
Or Rice, remember when they went? Why in the world did they play that game?
Those were all return games because Purdue didn't want to pay people out to come to Ross-Ade, so they did home and homes back then, where you'd go to Rice to get Rice to come to Purdue twice, something like that, and that's just not the way business is done anymore. Purdue shouldn't leave its home field in September very often, with the exception of years where you want to go to Notre Dame, stuff like that, where it's a showcase game, something that's going to actually put you in the spotlight and help your program. But it's just, they schedule these games so far out, nobody had any idea what this was going to look like. As I said before, I think that, you apologize to no one for scheduling wins. I think the developmental opportunity in September of playing teams you should beat, and you should beat without incident, knock on wood, is really valuable. And this isn't basketball where you have to, build your NCAA tournament resume, things like that by beefing up your strength of schedule. This is the opposite of what Matt Painter does in basketball, where he plays the world because he wants his team the best it can be in March, and he wants to sweet talk the net rankings, and he wants to build an NCAA tournament resume, things like that. In football, if you get to a point where you have to worry about your playoff resume, great. But that's not now.
That is in the great problem to have category.
Yes. Let's worry about that 10 years from now, if everything goes perfectly for this program from here on out. But I think that wins are gold, and wins engage your fan base, wins engage recruits, portal recruits. The more notable you are, the more relevant you are, the more you're top of mind for some of those people. But I think it's also about just giving people reason to take note of your program, kind of making memories, making experiences. As I wrote in my column here the other day, you don't remember that Jeff Brom was 2 games over 500 in 6 years at Purdue. Mm-hmm. You remember they had Rondell Moore. You remember they had Aiden O'Connell. You remember George Karlaftis, David Bell. You remember the Ohio State game. You remember some wild bowl games, things like that. It's being interesting is sort of job one. Being engaging is job one. Capturing hearts and minds is job one. Worry about the wins later. I know that's probably a loser's mentality to some of our more angst-ridden folks would probably accuse me of being, but I think that's reality. And I think reality is hard nowadays in college football. And I think it should be embraced and not run from.
Angst-ridden Purdue fans? What?
Angst-ridden.
No, not Purdue. But for all the talk about the schedule and all the talk about 18 out of 18, right? Historically speaking, and this is glass half full, right? But it's true. Lowered expectations or no expectations is a space where generally Purdue football and Purdue men's basketball have operated very well, right? when there aren't expectations attached,
for the most part,
and you can kind of go into the season and just kind of take whatever comes. And I hope that at least the rational, non-angsty people feel that way going into this season as another building block here in the Ryan Walters era?
I think people, when you take into account what Purdue's up against, especially in the NIL era, Ohio State's a professional organization. Michigan is a professional organization. Penn State is a professional organization. USC is going to be a professional organization. Oregon is going to be a professional organization. And the people just below them are not going to be all that far off of that. And, Purdue is still building itself up in terms of the infrastructure of the program, things like that, the donation part of it, for lack of a better term. And that's not going to stop being critical anytime soon. But I think it's about kind of laying a foundation here where you can go into games like that and go into seasons like this and have people thinking, hey, if I go there, you never know. Maybe we can beat some of those teams. Maybe we can compete with them. Maybe if I'm this transfer, that transfer, maybe that's the place that gives me the best path to the field right away to play on a very prominent stage and, kind of things like that. But I forgot your question.
I just think that the lowered expectations can be argued as a good thing, where there's always pressure. It's Big Ten football. It's big boy football. They're paying Ryan Walters a lot of money. The people in the John Purdue Club and the Boilermaker Collective are expecting results. Of course, the fan base is expecting results. So there's always some level of pressure. It just feels like because the schedule is beating people down and because they were picked to finish in last place, there is maybe a little bit more of a, hey, get to 4, and then everything after that is gravy. Be competitive. Don't get blown off the field in some of these really ridiculous games like Oregon and Penn State and Notre Dame and Ohio State. And, win your trophy games, find a way to keep the bucket, find a way to keep the cannon, and see if bowl eligibility can maybe somehow be in play. Because I think if this team could get to 500, Brian, with this schedule, I think just about everybody would treat that as a success, no?
Yeah. I think that, to the 18-18 thing, I think, not to criticize my colleagues in the voting media, but I think Purdue is not getting a benefit of the doubt in some ways in that they have a senior quarterback. They have a senior quarterback with NFL ability, in my opinion.
Who's returning too, right?
Yes,
same coach, same offense.
Who has some experience. How many new first-year quarterbacks are there in the Big Ten? It seems like everybody's doing the one-year rental thing nowadays. Purdue was fortunate enough to have Hudson Card for more than 1 year, and I think that should pay off this year. People aren't recognizing him, in my opinion, as being a pretty good player and somebody who's going to give Purdue a chance. I also don't think that they're giving Purdue credit last year for beating Minnesota, beating Illinois, beating Indiana, the teams in the middle or the bottom end of the middle that you have to beat to get to that number that you want to get to ultimately when it comes to a record. And I just don't understand why everybody's just looking at Minnesota and Illinois as just automatically better than Purdue. I get that Indiana has the new coach factor. There's an energy around that program right now, but Purdue didn't get any sort of bump for that last year with Ryan Walters in terms of preseason expectations. So I just think there's some stuff here, some underlying currents, some micro or macro level. I don't know if it's micro or macro. I can never keep those straight sort of elements to this that can build a case that Purdue is really kind of underseeded in those rankings. But I mean, obviously Purdue has to go out and prove it because Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, they're all saying the same thing about you because the teams you can beat in the Big Ten nowadays are the teams you have to beat.
Yeah, every single preview show that I've watched where they have done those game-by-game predictions, they're talking about, oh, well, they're going to take care of this team. And the same guy that's doing a Illinois podcast or whatever else is saying, Purdue, Indiana, yeah, we're going to win that game. No problem. So it is kind of funny how that ends up working out.
Well,
Brian, we'll bring
the scores of those games, too. I mean, it's not like, Purdue just squeaked by Minnesota and Illinois. They kicked their faces in.
Yeah. And if not for, scheduling Fresno and Syracuse, if one of those was an FCS opponent instead, I know we're only talking about 5 instead of 4, but, or maybe even a lighter game like an FCS and a MAC opponent instead of those two schools. And that's a bowl team last year as well. And then maybe we're having a different conversation going into 2024. But I digress. That's just, sometimes how life works, I feel like, for Purdue sports.
That's kind of sports.
Yeah,
stuff happens.
Absolutely.
If Hudson Card plays at Northwestern, who knows? If one or two plays against Fresno State go the other way, who knows? That said, they won a close game with Virginia Tech. They won a close game against Indiana. You can what if all day long, but that's sports.
Yeah, it definitely cuts both ways with the wins and losses. Mm-hmm. Brian, we'll bring you back here for the picks coming up in just a little bit, but great to talk with you and looking forward to Saturday.
Very excited to be here. Thank you, Derek. Or Kyle, Brian, whatever your name is.
Yeah, you can call me Kyle for a little while. That's fine. Guys are giving me a hard time about that with Kyle getting eaten by a shark or witness protection or wherever he ended up going. He went to the Purdue Exponent, by the way. You don't have to worry about that. The Whitaker Inn is where you should go for the Midwestern Oasis experience. It's perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway, escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn, a proud sponsor here of us at Golden Black and Golden Black Radio. We're going to come back with segment 4, which is our historical look back with Alan Karpick. We'll talk a little bit about Purdue and Indiana State games from the past and Purdue's August games over the years, which, August football seems like it's been around for a long time, but we're really only talking about, it's mostly a 21st century thing for August football. But there's also a slate of games that the guys are going to pick involving some Big Ten teams, which are interesting, including Penn State's voyage into Morgantown, which is always a very dangerous place to play. And for some reason, we have to talk about LSU and USC as being involving a Big Ten team, which is weird, will continue to be weird, will always be weird to think that SC and LSU playing in Vegas is somehow a game that's relevant to Big Ten fan interests. But again, like we talked about with Tom, that is the new reality for the college football landscape. But let's go ahead and welcome to the stage the publisher of GoldenBlack.com, and the unofficial mayor of West Lafayette and Purdue sports historian Alan Karpick. And Alan, as you mentioned, Indiana State and Purdue, no strangers to one another. They just played not that long ago. And I think they've played 6 times in their history, if I'm not mistaken. I looked that up earlier today, and I probably should have written it down. But take me through kind of this historical look back, not only for Purdue ISU, but also just Purdue in some of these season openers over the years. Hold on, Alan. You got to unmute your mic. Sorry. I think we'll get Alan back here in a second once we can.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go.
It would only be fitting that it would be me that would make the first technical error in this.
It's week 1 for everybody, right?
That's the way I roll. No, it's mind-boggling that we would be taking apart the Purdue-Indiana State series because it is 6-0 Purdue. Most of the games have not been close, dating all the way back to maybe your great-grandfather's birthday, maybe in 1936. But this was I think the first game between the teams. Then they didn't play again until 1990. Purdue beats them 41-13. A former wrestler that catches a touchdown pass in that game, Danyasha Yetz, Eric Hunter, the Purdue quarterback that day. Fred Akers last season, and one of his 2 wins in his last season at Purdue. And then, of course, they didn't play again. I think when we got back together 2006, that game, Derek, was a tough game for 60-35. It wasn't a pitcher's duel, but it was a very costly game for Purdue because Torrey Williams, one of Purdue's better defensive backs at that era, blows out a knee in that game. And that was, I can remember that being the cover of Golden Black when Torrey went down for that one, but it's putting on 60 points on opening day, an all-time record for Purdue. And then I think they go to 13. Brian mentioned that game, a game that Purdue needed a late interception also to stop Indiana State and get Daryl Hazel's lone victory of 2013, his only victory that season, and not a good thing to say the least. A couple years later, Purdue beats Indiana State under Daryl Hazel as well, pretty decisively, but did that. And then, of course, we go back to the game 2022 in Purdue's 56-love win over the Sycamores in Jeff Brom's last season at the helm.
Yeah, and we had talked about some of these August games that Purdue has played over the years, and you had a statistic about that hasn't necessarily been pretty, albeit it's been a lot of these games that have been recent, and we talked about with Brian, Purdue struggles in season openers over the last 7-8 seasons.
Well, and for a while they were really good. I mean, and then Jeff Brom, who, as Brian talked about, 2 wins over 500 and turned the program around. You can't argue that. But yes, Purdue has struggled in openers. In August openers, you can remember you were a young man in 1998, and Drew Brees' debut as a starter at the Coliseum when the Boilermakers lost in the was it the Pigskin? I think the Pigskin in their kickoff classic in a 28-17 loss to USC. Then they played in 2002 against Brock Spack's it wasn't Brock Spack's Illinois State team at that time. Obviously, he was Purdue's defensive coordinator that year. Purdue beat them bad in a game where Purdue was able to add a 12th game that year. But overall, 2-3 wins against Western Michigan, against the Fighting PJ Flex. It was a 43-34 win in that one. And then, of course, the ones that really have kind of been bruised Purdue, 2018 Northwestern, Rondale Moore. I think he set the total yardage record in the first half, and yet Purdue loses to Northwestern in that game. And then, of course, in 2019, that game you mentioned already, losing to Nevada on a 54-yard field goal by a freshman at the buzzer after making a couple mistakes, a catastrophic loss out in Reno that really put Purdue in a bad way. And I want to correct myself, Rondale Moore, that was all-purpose yards. Rondale Moore had almost set the record, and did set the record in that game against Northwestern when ESPN ABC was at that game as well.
And it's funny because they were able to bounce back from a few of those. Like, if I'm not mistaken, the Northwestern was part of an 0-3 start, and 2018 turned into a nice season for Purdue. Of course, the memorable Ohio State win that year, the Tyler Trent game. I remember, if we're going in the Wayback Machine, Alan, this I don't think was an August game, but lost to Bowling Green in 2003 and then rattled off something like 4 or 5 wins in a row. And that ended up being a really nice season for kind of those prime Joe Tiller years from the Rose Bowl into the remains of the Breeze era and some of those great defensive players that went on to have great NFL careers like Ray Edwards and Cliff Averill and guys like that.
Right, and Purdue has never beaten Bowling Green. If we're going really deep, that's a hard thing to stomach if you're Purdue. And they're not, and the Falcons are not on the schedule upcoming. You mentioned that too. Purdue. It's funny on Purdue's website they don't mention non-conference games after this year. Is that maybe a conspiracy theory? Because I know they've been trying to work out of getting out of that North Carolina, Wake Forest. They've got Notre Dame on the schedule, as you talked about. Next year they play Southern Illinois and Ball State in Notre Dame. But the following year, it's Wake Forest and Notre Dame, and then it's North Carolina and Notre Dame, and at least on the schedule that you can read, it used to be published. So I don't know if there's something up to that. We have to ask Mike Babinski that tomorrow on our Golden Black Live show. But Purdue has not made it easier for itself with this scheduling for Ryan Walters in years 1 and 2.
I was digging around because I was going through the list of games that you had sent me that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, including that Penn State-West Virginia game. And I thought to myself, West Virginia, obviously men's basketball has had a history. They've done scrimmages. They did, I think, a home-and-home in was it the Juwan Johnson, Hummel, Etuan era? I think somewhere around then. And I don't remember Purdue and West Virginia ever playing. And I went back and looked, and they've played one time. And it was during the Jim Coletto era. And strangely enough, Purdue went there and won in Morgantown. Do you have a recollection of that game, Alan?
They did, but they played them twice because they returned the game to Ross-Ade Stadium in a night game. It was a non-televised or not major televised night game that Morgan Burke wanted to play nighttime football. And West Virginia came back and returned the favor and beat the heck. Famous Amos Zeroway had a big game in that game for
the running back, right?
West Virginia against Purdue. But yes, Purdue did beat Jim Coletto's second to last season, 1995. Really, things were looking really good for that
team. They go and beat a pretty good West Virginia team, or a decent West Virginia team, I should say, on the road. And I think that the Mountaineers missed a 23-yard field goal at the buzzer. I went to graduate school in Morgantown, so they take their football very seriously. They tend to burn the town down when they have big wins, and that one was an embarrassing loss for them to the Boilermakers in 1995 when the Purdue played in Morgantown.
Yeah, burn the town down. By the way, is not a figure of speech. Like they quite literally set.
They do. There's a place called Sunnyside there, and they literally, if things go well for the Mountaineers, at least back in the day, it's a big deal. And if they beat Penn State on Saturday, you can bet that will take place in that one as well.
Yeah, lock your couches away if you want them.
Yep, no doubt.
If you want them to be safe. Alan, of course, the publisher of goldenblack.com, and we want to remind you not to forget to take advantage of our flash sale of new members. For new members only, 50% off an annual subscription, so half off. We want all of you to be members of goldenblack.com. This has been extended due to popular demand, but please be sure to sign up before it expires. Let's welcome back Brian here, and we'll get to some of these games. And I think we'll have Tom hop on as well. Talk about just some of these highlight games, Alan, that you wanted to mention for week 1 in the Big Ten. And I guess let's start with Penn State and West Virginia, because that's I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm some sort of expert on West Virginia, nor am I one of Penn State, but that a tricky game, right? A true road game in Morgantown for Penn State to go there and take on the rival of one of their old rivals. I remember the days when Penn State used to play Pitt, and that used to kind of be a thing. But Penn State, West Virginia, what are your initial thoughts on that one, Brian?
Well, it is a huge rivalry game especially for West Virginia. But they're 49. They were 9-49 against, and I remember when the long time ago that they finally broke the streak. You know, it's going to be an interesting one because West Virginia's really got a situation where Penn State's got a lot to play for this year, as we've talked about, and the ability to be a team that is considered to be one of the top 3 in the Big Ten. And yet West Virginia had a better season than a lot of people thought last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that game plays out. And it will be an unbelievable environment, I would think, in Morgantown, just because nobody has a bigger inferiority complex than West Virginia fans, especially when Penn State comes to town.
Yeah, I think the Nittany Lions just they're kind of in this area where, you know, obviously they've been really good under James Franklin, but there's that tier that's sort of below the Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia tier, where it's like, you know, Penn State and Notre Dame and some of these other programs who have been really good, and they're churning out like these 10-3, sometimes 11-2 type seasons, but they get, not that West Virginia's a big game, but they get into these big games and they, you know, sometimes lose or even fall on their face. And I wonder if, you know, this one, is this a not trap necessarily, Tom, but a game that obviously Penn State has to take seriously?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. They're going to be jacked and excited to have these guys come to Morgantown. Not sure the last time Penn State was down there, but back in the day, those are 2 teams when they were independents would play a lot in the 70s and 80s and even beyond that. So, yeah, you know, these are high times in State College, PA. I think James Franklin thinks this may be his best team yet. Franchise quarterback, very good defense. They have a new offensive coordinator, too. They got the KU offensive coordinator. So, yeah, you know, they got to be ready because button up because, like you guys have talked about, they're going to be amped down there in Morgantown, and this could be a trapdoor game for Penn State.
Yeah, 8-point spread on that game. So Vegas also taking that game pretty seriously. I think the other matchup of power versus power that we're going to talk about is LSU and USC, a game played in Vegas. And Brian, I'm kind of mad that I have to now pay attention to LSU, USC, and Vegas because technically it involves a Big Ten opponent. Is that wrong of me to be curmudgeon-y and uptight about that?
It is pretty strange, isn't it?
It's weird. It'll always be weird.
What's going to be weird is like actually going out to those places for conference games. Yeah. That's when it's going to kind of hit. And like when Rutgers has to travel to UCLA, how just bizarre that's going to be. But yeah, USC and LSU, this is precisely the sort of showcase game that I think really matters for both of those programs. You're on national TV. You're the game everybody's talking about. I can't claim to know enough about either team to really make a credible prediction. I could have made stuff up about West Virginia and Penn State, but you didn't ask me about that game. I would probably say LSU, just because I have questions about Lincoln Riley. I think LSU is going to be better coached. I don't know. I don't really have much knowledge of either program, and that's college football now. Like, who knows what anybody's going to look like? The thing about Penn State at West Virginia is they've got experience at quarterback. Does LSU have that? No, they just lost Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors to the NFL, and but I'm sure they'll have somebody. USC is always going to have good quarterback play with Lincoln Riley there. Are they a tough enough program at this stage under Lincoln Riley to go win a game like that? I don't know. I don't know anything about any of those Pac-12 teams, but I would give LSU the benefit of the doubt just because they've always got NFL players all over the place, and I think they're probably a little tougher as a program.
LSU's lost 4 straight week 1 games.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so there you go. So that's guaranteed because there's so much stability in football these days. You just know that
they played against Florida State last year, didn't they?
Ran them off. FSU ended up running them off the field late in that game.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
correct.
Good. That completely debunks everything I just said. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
We'll edit this after the fact. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
2 other games that pique my interest because both of these teams appear on Purdue's schedule and I think are viewed as kind of some of the weaker teams in the Big Ten. Michigan State hosting FAU, and then Northwestern's only a 3-point home favorite against Miami of Ohio. And as we kind of talked about with FCS opponents, especially with MAC Big Ten games, and it's been Purdue a couple of times, Northern Illinois, teams like that. Bowling Green that we just mentioned, not unheard of for a MAC team to go into a road Big Ten stadium and come away with a win. So what are we thinking about those games, guys?
Yeah, I remember.
Tom, Dean, I will throw to you, man. Have a.
I remember the 1995 Northwestern team. I think they beat Notre Dame, and they turned around and lost to Miami of Ohio at home. So you're right, Derek. The MAC's been a thorn in the side to a lot of Big Ten schools over the years. Purdue's been one of those schools. You talked about, heck, the 1997 loss at Toledo by Purdue is a famous and infamous one for a lot of different reasons. So, yeah, you got to stay buckled up. Miami has a nice tradition there. They have a good coach. So, that's one that's I kind of got my eye on. And, you mentioned FAU. FAU is a good program. Tom Herman's coaching there now, the Owls. And how about our old friend Brock Spack? He's taken his Illinois State Redbirds to Iowa City, Iowa. And I know he's about a 22.5-point underdog, but, Brock's going to have him dialed up. He's sort of like a miniature Kirk Ferentz. They're always going to play tough football. They're going to run the ball and not beat themselves usually, right?
But he's not suspended like Crooked Kirk.
Yeah.
I've always thought that Kirk Ferentz was up to no good.
He's a bad guy.
Has that look about him.
All right, since I did some homework on this, I got to throw this other one out. Could you believe this? Miami has won 5 straight games against Northwestern.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. That is that, and you're
and
right.
They, and they keep scheduling them.
Talk about the 95 team, but 98, 2003. Again, it's so relevant now in college football because what happened last year is guaranteed to happen this year. So there you go.
How about Fresno State at Michigan?
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of change at Michigan. Michigan's Michigan. New head coach, first-time head coach, Sharon Moore. I know Fresno's got a new coach too, but we saw Fresno last year with Jeff Tedford when he was the coach. You guys are college football fans. That's a very proud program out there in the Valley, and always well coached and tough. That one can maybe be a little interesting. Just something to kind of keep your eyeball on when those scores scroll by your screen on Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think
just
Miami
wonder if
versus Northwestern. I just think Northwestern's season last year was a sugar high. I think they just found lightning in a bottle under an interim coach, and how sustainable that's going to be, I have no idea. I think Michigan State's a mess. I think Jonathan Smith's a great coach, but I think he took over a kind of a program in chaos, which is the environment Michigan State has historically existed in. So I could see that being kind of a deal where the wheels come off in week 1 for them too.
I wonder, Tom, to piggyback on your Michigan point, I just wonder how much of last year there was some soul selling that was done that we didn't know about for Connor Stallions and everything else. And, they got their title, right? And then Harbaugh hit the road, and you just kind of wonder if maybe the carriage turns into a pumpkin a little bit for them coming up this year.
Michigan's got the new quarterback as well, J.J. McCarthy. Yeah. So that could be kind of interesting. Like I said, I don't know anything about Fresno State this year, other than Jeff Tedford not being there. But I do know, again, history doesn't really matter. But we mentioned it anyway. And, again, that's a program, man. That's where Kalen DeBoer was at, too. He followed Jeff Tedford at one point before Tedford came back. So just a program that's very proud. It's won a lot of big games over the years. Remember Pat Hill. Iconic Pat Hill there going to Wisconsin and winning one. So, again, it could be kind of a fun game early in the season. Again, guys, that first game of the year, we talk about how everything is so new. So many new faces on these programs. No exhibition games. We don't know what to expect. First time with live bullets, so to speak. So crazy things can happen in week one, no doubt.
Looking forward to it. And, of course, here at goldenblack.com, we'll have all of the coverage for you with the Saturday simulcast. And then, of course, articles as well, goldenblack.com. If you're a first-time subscriber, sign up now to get half off at goldenblack.com. Appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot for joining me, and looking forward, Tom, to Tuesday's show and every Friday here doing this exact thing with some more in-depth opponent previews, because once we get past Indiana State, of course, I think it'll warrant some more in-depth opponent previews. But appreciate all you guys coming on and joining me today on Golden Black Radio.
Great first show, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
We're going to wrap up here with a final shout out to our sponsors. Thanks so much to Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans, East End Grill, and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, perfect for relaxing and having a staycation or a weekend getaway. You can escape from the ordinary at Whitaker Inn. And Sand Valley Resort, where you can sign up at sandvalleypursuits.com/Purdue giveaway to win free tickets for the October 5th battle at Camp Randall between the Badgers and Boilers. And, of course, once again, I know that I sound like a broken record here, but this is Golden Black Radio, right? Don't forget to take advantage of our half-off sale, goldenblack.com, for a subscription. Until next time, which will be the Saturday simulcast, we'll see you then. For Alan, for Tom, and for Brian, I'm Derek. We'll talk to you next time here on Golden Black Radio. Boiler up.